My name's Quentin Smith. I'm an attorney with the firm. I am not presenting today, so I get to be the ringleader for this a little bit. The topics today are going to be kind of a drive-by shooting of some guesses and things that maybe we think might affect employers as a result of President-elect Trump's somewhat surprising victory. I don't think that we can pretend to know exactly what a Trump administration is going to do, because I'm not sure Trump knows exactly what he's going to do on many of these issues. But we're going to venture some guesses and give some guidance to some things that we think might come up in the next 4 years that will impact employers from an HR perspective. We're going to kick things off with Brian McMath. He's an associate here at the firm who is going to talk about wage and hour issues.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming. We appreciate it. So as Quentin said, this is just going to be real quick, and this is all sort of prognostication at best. So we're just going to give our best guess as to what will happen. While your Facebook feeds and news stations may say otherwise, Trump probably will be sworn in as our next president on January 20th. Possible labor secretary. So the Secretary of Labor has a lot to do with how these laws shake out. Two names have been floated. One is Louis Barletta. He is a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania. He's been a vocal opponent of outgoing Secretary Perez's rulemakings. He's been a vocal opponent of the new overtime rule, which I'm sure folks in here are well versed in, and if not, let me know. Bear in mind that only Barletta, I think, has said that he's being considered, so that hasn't come from anyone else. Andrew Puzder, who is the CEO of CKE Restaurants, Carl's Jr., Hardee's. They employ about 75,000 people. Huge fast food chain in the United States and other countries. He served as a senior economic advisor to the Trump campaign, and he was mentioned by an anonymous transition team official as recently as, I believe, yesterday. So no formal names yet. We don't really know who it's going to be, but those are the two possibilities. Once again, so Puzder is interesting because the fast food industry was sort of specifically called out by name in the new overtime rule as a particular problem area. So to pick the CEO of one of those chains sends a fairly clear message as to where the administration stands on that. So first and foremost, the new overtime rule. As far as we can tell, it is dead until otherwise noted. This is the rule that would raise the floor for exempt employees from $4.55 a week up to $9.13 a week, and that's regardless of duties. You have to be making at least that much to even be considered exempt. November 22nd, a federal judge enjoined the rule nationwide. That includes New Mexico. No New Mexico employer is under a legal obligation at this time to follow that rule. That court's injunction is valid for all states. The Department of Labor has indicated that it will appeal that ruling up to the Fifth Circuit. That probably doesn't matter because neither the appeal nor the case itself are going to be resolved before January 20th. We would be shocked if that actually happened. And once the Trump administration is sworn in, all they have to do is instruct the Secretary of Labor, drop the appeal, drop the case. We're not gonna defend it. So that rule is likely dead. As far as possibilities with what may happen, the new administration could seek to amend the rule. They could maybe lower the exemption floor. That was obviously the biggest concern for employers and the comments that they received. They could try to lower the floor. They could try to, Trump has indicated that maybe he would be a fan of providing a more robust small business exemption in the rule, or they just leave the old rule where it's at. So for the time being, $4.55 a week is the floor. Please note that does not affect the duties test. So those employees still have to be properly classified by their job duties as exempt in order to avoid paying them overtime. So, questions on that? Going very, very fast. Okay. The federal minimum wage, that is, Mr. Puzder has been an outspoken opponent of federal minimum wage. Repeal of federal minimum wage is probably unlikely. That's fairly well entrenched, and they'd have some pretty significant hurdles to get over to actually get rid of a federal minimum wage, even though that's what the rhetoric has been on occasion. Don't plan on seeing an increase in the federal minimum wage anytime in the next 4 to 8 years. However, what may end up happening, and what has happened sort of nationwide in the past election, is state and local efforts have ramped up considerably. Santa Fe has a higher minimum wage, Albuquerque has a higher minimum wage, Seattle, Arizona, all over the country, and sort of regardless of the way the states voted, increases in minimum wage have been sort of popping up everywhere. So that will likely continue. It may even increase, given that the federal government will not be helping that along, in our guess anyway. Excuse me. The Wage and Hour Division issues guidance documents, the administrator of the Wage and Hour Division. These are essentially position papers on where the WHD stands on various issues. They are not formal rules. There's sort of sticky areas of law that say sometimes they are legally binding, sometimes they aren't. It really depends on how they're issued and under whose authority. So one of the big guidance documents that was issued by the outgoing administrator was in July 2015, which clarified WHD's position on how to define independent contractors. This is a murky area that causes everyone heartburn, and no one knows how to do it because all the standards are different. So based on that guidance document, as far as the Department of Labor is concerned, the economic realities of how a worker depends on or does not depend on the employer determines whether or not they are properly classified as an independent contractor or not. That is different from the state of New Mexico's test. I'm sure the state has gotten actually fairly aggressive with auditing independent contractor heavy employers. They are the sort of working theory is that because the state is in a budget crisis right now, finding some extra tax revenue here and there is probably in their best interest, so those efforts will likely continue. So just know that those are different, and WHD guidance can be revoked, it can be amended, it can be redone, it can be almost anything, because it's just the administrator basically saying, I think this is what the law says. Department of Labor enforcement, as I'm sure everyone knows, Secretary Perez was very active in the enforcement arena, investigations and enforcement actions for back wages. He was very active, very consistent. The incoming secretary, depending on who it ends up being, is probably likely going to be less so. They may have more stringent standards. They may, they may just say not all complaints are worth our time. They may increase what needs to be brought to their attention in order for the department to actually initiate enforcement. What's also likely coming, because we have a Republican Congress, is Department of Labor's budget will probably be slashed considerably, especially as it pertains to enforcement. So it doesn't really matter if the Department of Labor wants to enforce stuff. If they don't have any money to do it, they really can't. So that is probably coming as well. Please bear in mind that that does not affect any private right of action. So employees who believe they've been misclassified or believe they're owed overtime, they will continue to have a private right of action against employers to do that. At the state level, other than statutes that refer to federal laws and federal regulations specifically that sort of change as those change, probably very limited to no change at the state level. Other than, like I said, minimum wage activities will probably continue if not ramp up. And that's sort of what we're thinking as far as wage and hour goes. Questions, concerns? Does that about cover it? Okay, well then what I will do is we will turn it over to Eleanor Warenko, and she's going to discuss the next topic.